So the first commandment, thou shalt live where you invest, right? How do you do that? You choose a property that makes sense to live in and then rent out. That qualifies for single families, just like John was talking about. Also qualifies for duplexes, triplexes, and up to 4 units where you can literally live in one of the units and rent out the other units. Now, bear this in mind. Not all duplexes, not all triplexes, not all fourplexes are created equal. The more units, up to 4, tend to be smaller individualized units. Sometimes triplexes have a really good mix of it might be a 2-bedroom, 2-bath on one level, maybe 2-bedroom, 1-bath on the next level, and then maybe a studio up top. You want to really think that through. What do you guys think about some of your early house hacking? And I know you did a single family. What about some other types of property types?
I mean, honestly, any property type that can be subdivided without a whole lot of work is going to work for you, right? This is where your creativity has to come involved, because the bi-level works well for me. Most guys my age that are in their 20s don't care about living in a basement. So I turned the basement into a bedroom. That was simple enough. The downstairs kid bedroom that was a little too small. Okay, just rent it for a little cheaper. Find a guy that didn't quite make as much as the rest in the friend group and give him a little bit of a deal, right? There's 2 extra bedrooms upstairs. I use those accordingly and rent them out as well. No matter what the property is, it's more about finding a way to use it for what you want it to be used for than going in there and saying, well, this type of property is right or that type of property is right. I would encourage you to try to make a property fit what you want it to do when you're looking at them. That said, for first timers, if you're going to do it, I would stay under 4 units, pretty much in all circumstances, because of the loans it's going to allow you to get. That's the biggest advantage to house hacking is with a traditional investment loan, you're going to need 15 to 25% down, depending on the lender minimum, and you're going to have much higher rates. If you go to a primary home, it's just going to house hack it, you're going to be able to put 3.5% down and get lower rates. So the combination of having a lower rate and a slightly less down payment, you'll have roughly the same monthly payment as you would if you bought an investment property, but you get to live in this one, right? And you get to let somebody else pay for it, which is why we're all doing investing.
That's true. That's true. And so are you ready to flip your first house? Or finally ready to flip one the right way? You can create energy, engage talent, and own the results by taking the Flip Savvy course. I teach Flip Savvy, and I help investors find, fund, and renovate their first or fifth flip. Go to flipsavvycourse.com for more information.
So, John, it's important you talk about the 4 units or less. I think also just livability of what's your situation. Is it somewhere you'd want to live? Is there enough, parking? Or you also do the mental fortitude, to be a landlord. You want 4 units, which, in hindsight, that may have been something to springboard me to grow the wealth, more units. And sometimes that's the goal of investors, more units, more profitability. But at that time, looking back, it was tough enough with a single family house, the non-house hack. I don't know if I could have managed or effectively managed 3 more units at the time and have the reserves to, replace 2 water heaters at once if that something went out as a 19-year-old, 20-year-old,
That's where it gets tougher when you get to multiple years. So one of the tougher parts about multifamilies is that you do have 4 HVACs, you've got 4 water heaters, and you've got 4 sets of problems. And if you do a single family, you still have multiple people in it, but you typically only have 1 set of toilets, 1 room, 1 HVAC room, and the whole thing. So there is a little bit less reserve. And with single family homes, in my opinion, they're more, I know for a fact, they're more marketable. A single family will sell a lot quicker in the event of an emergency over a multifamily. If you're a first timer that's entering into something, your exit strategy, you may not want it to come true, but you have to have one. And a single family is going to allow you to exit the property in probably 30 to 70 days, right? Where a typical multifamily is going to take you 50 to 120 days to exit in our market right now. And that's pretty true for most markets.
And pretty much the higher the doors, because I had a duplex and it was phenomenal. I think you did that deal. So, getting into a duplex, it was definitely fun. And it had its own set of challenges, right? And I wasn't even house hacking. I was just real estate investing. And so what makes it cool, we're going to talk about commandment number 2. Thou shall run the numbers of the landlord. You're going to have to know different rental comps. You're going to have to engage talent from the Flip Savvy course. You engage talent to determine what's going to be best for you in your personal situation. And even though you live there, you got to understand it's still an investment. What say you?
Yeah, you want to know what the rents are, you have some vacancy, you need to build up some reserves. What's the ROI? That's when a lot of investors are doing this for the return on investment. So it's there's a lot of things that factor in there. But gosh, going back to single family versus the four units, there's benefits, drawbacks to both, and John hit on a few of them, but also the four units, you've got there's always be household disputes or squabbles where you've got a single family, or if you've got a fourplex, you're going to have sometimes tenants upset if somebody's their parking spot, or somebody's messing with their mail, or somebody's using somebody's trash can, or whatever it is. Sometimes you have to be a mediator or have a property manager to handle those type of tenant disputes. When you're house hacking, a lot of times you're in the middle of it. They know you own it and it's your house and you got roommates.
Would you have a property manager if you are house hacking a unit that big? So it's one thing to have like a relationship. And you guys didn't have property management. Once you had it,
one of my clients has done it with a lot of success. I know that's how he did his first one. He gave it to a property manager. He paid the property manager too, because I practice the second bank account method, which is where like that house has its own bank account. All the rent goes in it, pays all the bills, and all that reserve just kind of stays there to do its thing. Whenever we were talking about him doing it, he didn't want to be the one to collect. He didn't even want the people in the house to really know that he was the owner. So he hired a property manager and they just rented out like student housing. He pays in like everybody else does, and then he goes and collects his money from the business account at the end. That way he kept some level of privacy. I didn't personally do that. I liked everybody knowing that I owned it. I didn't have a problem sharing it. I was pretty cut and dry with everybody. I tried to make it incredibly simple, because what you learn with tenants is a lot of times, not all the times, but especially younger tenants, which is kind of what this is geared towards, they do not know how to do things like pay their bills on time or keep up with electricity bills when they're come due. So to a certain extent, if you're in a house hack, you kind of have to make it simpler for your tenants, right? So like every time I ever built them, they never got a bill for cable. They never got a bill for water. They never got a bill for any of that. It was, here's your one bill for everything. Go away. We don't need to do math. We don't need to chase it.